All right, well, right now, confusion over shots isn't just at the doctor's office. States are rewriting the rules and families are caught in the middle. Find out what it means for parents and children this morning. Also, we are roughly 14 months away from next year's midterms, but we just saw a seismic shift in one particular race. We'll examine this latest candidate and who's tossed their hat into the ring now. And the road up Kennesaw Mountain is about to take a turn, and it could also change the way you reach the top. We'll find out what it could mean if you want to take in this view of our area. This is The Take. Hi, everyone. I'm Jonathan Martin. Happy Friday to you. And I'm filling in, of course, for Chesley McNeil this morning. This is The Take, where we always go beyond the headlines and look at why and how stories are impacting you in our community. Experts will share what they know, and we'll try, of course, to have a little fun, especially because it's Friday as well. Well, for the first time in more than 4 years, there are now more Americans looking for work than there are jobs available. A report from the Bureau of Labor Statistics shows the nation's number of unemployed in July rose to 7.24 million. So that's just above 7.18 million job openings. That pushed the openings to unemployed ratio down to 0.99. By the way, that's the lowest since April of 2021, and hiring as well slowed sharply, with the economy adding only 73,000 jobs in July. Yes, that is far short of what economists had expected. Well, the numbers appear to be a sign that the labor market is losing steam and is now also raising questions about where the economy is headed next. Well, with us this morning is Christopher Fagan, a partner with the accounting firm of Moore Colson, based right here in Atlanta. Christopher, good to see you this Friday morning. Okay, so from your perspective, is what I just mentioned, is this all a sign of a short-term slowdown or something more structural that we're going to see in the labor market?
It's really hard to say at this point because you've got a confluence of things that are impacting the economy as a whole. So businesses in general are dealing with inflationary pressures of tariffs. There are, frankly, supply chain constraints that people are still working through as it relates to tariffs as they resource. And then the cost of capital for businesses is historically high, as it's been in the past 15 years or so. So as those things are weighing on the economy, businesses have somewhat put their growth plans on hold and reevaluated how they deploy capital. And at some point, the labor takes a hit on that front.
Yeah, and Christopher, you know, when you hear those numbers like 7.24 million people unemployed, I personally know several of my friends who are unemployed right now looking for jobs. What should the everyday worker here in Georgia, or really across the country, take away from those stats?
Well, it's too early to say whether this is a long-term trend or just a blip in the economy. What we're seeing is businesses are evolving to the changes in the economy on a daily basis. So currently, while businesses aren't hiring at the rate they historically have, and is excess workforce, it's not to a point where we feel like it's a concerning trend. Typically, businesses are very nimble here, and they evolve and are able to make decisions to right size their business. And then as they are able to adjust to the impact of tariffs and the higher cost of capital due to interest rates, they'll be able to focus on growth again, which will bring back the jobs.
Yeah, a lot of people looking forward to when that happens. You know, a lot of people also, Christopher, may be thinking about maybe I need to kind of shift gears and have a job change, do something different. The numbers that we mentioned, is that perhaps a warning sign that it might be harder to go and do something new if you want to find other opportunities?
Yeah, businesses are going to be more selective right now in their hiring process, and definitionally, yes, it's going to be much harder for those looking for new opportunities, specifically in the white-collar trades. However, the blue-collar trades, there continues to be a labor shortage, and there's robust demand for jobs in those spaces, so I don't think they will be impacted as much as your college-educated workforce.
Yeah, and how does this all affect families? I mean, we do stories pretty much every day here on the news where we talk about people struggling to keep up with the basic everyday bills. Groceries, of course, a big concern for a lot of people. So how do these numbers, and when you talk about the employment, how is it affecting just the everyday person?
The economy and just inflation in general is affecting families probably detrimentally. So spending dollars are a zero-sum game, right? So every dollar the government takes in tariffs is a dollar it costs someone else. And sooner or later, that's passed on to consumers. So what we're seeing is that folks are cutting back on discretionary spending, things like vacations, going out to dinner, things of that nature, and businesses are cutting back uh, financing their growth. So it's rippling through the economy. But to your question about how it impacts families, people are definitely cutting back on their discretionary spend. And those who are struggling to pay bills are going to see lower wage increases going forward for a period of time until businesses are able to work through these macroeconomic factors.
Yeah, certainly uncertain times. Georgia's been always a little different, though. Our unemployment rate here has generally run below the national average. I even read a report that Georgia is one of the best states for even new grads to find jobs. So with the new numbers that we're just talking about, is that fading a bit, where Georgia is still kind of having an advantage over maybe other areas when it comes to finding a job?
So there's no recent information that's specific to Georgia that says that. What I would tell you is that Georgia is very resilient because of the diversity of our economy. When you think about Atlanta, you have a very white collar, highly educated workforce. But when you get outside of the economy of Atlanta, you have a very blue collar workforce. And that blue collar workforce is very diverse. They're working in manufacturing, farming, hospitality, and those industries somewhat balance out and make Georgia very resilient because oftentimes not all of those industries are taking the hit at the same time as it relates to economics.
All right, we got just a couple of minutes, so we're going to go ahead and move on. I think we have to go ahead and take a break, but Christopher Fagan, it's so good to talk with you, and like you said, uncertain times, but hopefully there will be some good news to share here pretty soon. We appreciate you joining us this morning on The Take.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Christopher. And another major jobs report for the month of August just came out about a half hour ago. Still ahead on The Take this morning, we'll examine its impacts on the U.S. labor market and how investors are taking in the news. That'll be in a live report coming up from New York. You're watching The Take. I'm filling in for Chesley this morning, and we'll be right back.
Secretary Kennedy, in your confirmation hearings, you promised to uphold the highest standards for vaccines. Since then, I've grown deeply concerned. The public has seen measles outbreaks, leadership in the National Institute of Health questioning the use of mRNA vaccines, the recently confirmed director of Centers for Disease Control and Prevention fired. Americans don't know who to rely on.
That's Republican Senator John Barrasso of Wyoming grilling Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. yesterday over his handling of the Trump administration's health care agenda. Joining us this morning is NBC Washington correspondent Alice Barr. Alice, we all watched that video, watched that interaction. And in fact, that was one of the more tame interactions. The secretary really was hammered from all sides. You watched a lot more of that. How bad was it?
Good morning, Jonathan. Yeah, what you just heard from Senator Barrasso, who is also a physician, by the way, was really more of a light seer compared to the full grilling that he got from some of the other senators on Capitol Hill. But it is important to note that it was not just from Democrats. Barrasso, again, he's the number 2, in fact, Republican in the Senate. And there were a number of other ones. Interesting that 2 of the Republicans on that committee are physicians, and they both had, pretty serious concerns to raise about a lot of controversial decisions that have been made by Secretary Kennedy during his time as health secretary, and specifically including Senator Raphael Warnock of Georgia, saying that he believes that Secretary Kennedy is a hazard to the health of the American people. Republican Bill Cassidy, another one of the physicians on the committee, pointed to new restrictions on COVID vaccine approvals that now are only applying to older adults and high-risk Americans with other underlying conditions. Pharmacies are now requiring prescriptions in many states or not offering the shots at all, at least for now. And Senator Cassidy said, quote, "I would say effectively we're denying people vaccine." Secretary Kennedy rejected that assertion, but nonetheless, it is out there. And there seems to be evidence that, getting your insurance to cover your vaccine or just getting it physically from the pharmacy is not as simple as it was, say, a month or 2 before now.
All right. Well, Alice, we did hear Secretary Kennedy, what happened there, but we also saw that he's still getting the critical support and the backing of President Trump. Do we expect that to continue, considering many Republicans, at least some of them now, changing their tune?
Yeah, so he said, President Trump said that he had not actually watched the hearing, but he said he heard that Secretary Kennedy did great. He called him a good man and said that he likes that he has different ideas. And that's what Secretary Kennedy would say in his own defense, is that he believes that, he's on the right side here. He said, we're going to tell people the truth for the first time. And President Trump seemed to back him on that he likes his sort of outsider perspective. And again, this idea of making America healthy again is what Secretary Kennedy initially ran on, and then President Trump kind of embraced. And it is a more alternative method to approaching healthcare, medical care in this country. And, Secretary Kennedy said that we have a lot of ingrained illness in this country, and that he thinks that is why some people needed to lose their jobs. Again, he just recently fired the director of the Centers for Disease Control there in Atlanta, and that has been a huge issue and something else that he took a lot of heat over. Senator Elizabeth Warren, for instance, said, well, she didn't bow to him, she didn't take the knee, and so you fired her. Secretary Kennedy sort of rejected that and said that, there need to be some changes. He has said that the CDC made mistakes during the pandemic, and that he thinks that all justifies the shakeup that we've been seeing.
Yeah, Alice, you just talked about the fired CDC director. We also know that we heard from her directly in a new editorial. What did she say, and has Kennedy said anything in response?
Yeah, she wrote in the Wall Street Journal that she was fired because she refused to pre-approve the recommendations of a vaccine advisory panel newly filled with people who have publicly expressed anti-vaccine rhetoric. Secretary Kennedy was asked about that directly. He said that he did not say that to her. He was asked whether that means he's accusing her of lying, and he said, yes, that is what he was doing. We heard some pushback on that. Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina, for instance, said that he has a hard time believing that all of these scientists that Secretary Kennedy is discrediting and saying that they are the ones who are lying, he has a hard time believing that these people would go to the CDC with the express intention of lying to the American public about science. Just a lot of layers and a lot that came out in that hearing.
Yes, a lot of layers. Alice Barr, thank you so much for joining us. We've got plenty more news for you this morning, more stories to cover here in The Take. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. While the corridors of power over in Washington wrestle with the politics of vaccines, states are now stepping in to chart their own course. This week, in fact, Florida's Surgeon General announced that the state plans to end all state-imposed vaccine mandates, including the long-standing requirements for children to attend public schools. Meantime, Democratic governors of Washington State, Oregon, and California created the West Coast Health Alliance to establish their own recommendations for who should be getting vaccines. Here to help us make sense of it all is Dr. Jody Guest from Emory University's Department of Epidemiology. We want to welcome you to The Take this morning, Dr. Guest. Thank you so much. So let's talk about this from a public health perspective. How big of a divide does this create when you have so many different directives?
It just shows additional lack of consensus and will cause a bunch of confusion. But most importantly, it's going to change the health of our country, and it's going to end up with multiple groups of people, with those who have access and those who do not.
And we heard just before we came to you about some of the different policies and some of the different directives. So you have kind of a patchwork of policies out there. Does this ever become a national health risk?
Absolutely. Again, confusing information, changing guidelines, different people putting out different guidelines. No one knows exactly who they should be listening to. And we're used to listening to one voice from the CDC.
Yeah. So how much of a risk do different communities or even states face if vaccination rates, let's say, drop in certain states but then remain steady in others?
Well, we're a mobile nation, and so we don't stay within our own state, but we will see differences. And those who have access to vaccines will be safer than those who do not have access to the vaccines.
Mm-hmm. And there's so many different views when it comes to communities and just individual families about the vaccines. Do we fear that perhaps we could see people even maybe crossing state lines just to get the shot?
We'll have to see what kind of guidelines are put in place to allow that or not allow that. would imagine there will be attention to that, and you will probably need to get vaccinated in your own state. But we're in a really unusual time, and so I don't know for sure how that will play out.
Yeah, we'll all just have to see. Now, we know Georgia still does require standard childhood immunizations, but they've limited COVID-19 mandates. How does that position here in the state kind of play into the national conversation?
You know, Georgia is on the lower side of vaccine uptake, and that's always been something we grapple with here in this state. We are below the threshold we want to be for childhood vaccinations. But when we limit choice and we limit parental choice for access to, for example, to COVID vaccines, we are taking that away as an option for parents who want that for their kids. And I think that that is not the right way to approach public health.
Mm-hmm. And do you think at all from your perspective that we could see outbreaks of diseases that we thought were pretty much gone?
We're already doing that. We see, we have the largest measles outbreak in the past 2 decades going on in the United States. And that is because we have seen decreasing rates of the vaccine that prevents it. And so we're about to see additional viruses as well spread, viruses that a lot of us have never even seen in our lifetime.
Mm-hmm. And we report different stories here. We heard from HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., then we hear from the CDC director who's now been fired, and people hear from their own state leaders. How does all this mixed messaging affect people's willingness to trust science overall?
This is one of the main reasons we're seeing a lack of trust in science. That inconsistent voice and the disagreement about what science is showing us. And we have a lot of evidence. We follow the evidence. That's what we do every single day. And we need to work very, very hard to build back our trust. But at the moment, these multiple voices and these arguments about what is the right science is not helping us.
And what advice would you give finally to people, as you alluded to, who get caught sort of in that middle ground between politics and science, to maybe reassure them that they're going to be okay?
So we know vaccines are safe. We know that the primary reason we want to use them, and they are the right choice for your children, is they keep them safe and they help them lead long and healthy lives. And that's the goal. That is always the goal with this. And we want to keep people not dying from vaccine preventable illnesses. So the science is still there. The science is still strong, and we have a lot of trust in the data and what it shows us about the vaccines.
All right, Dr. Jody Guest, we appreciate you joining us this Friday morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we have plenty more in store for you this Friday morning. Stay with us right here on The Take. Well, as kids are heading back to the classroom, GDOT is working to educate kids about being safer passengers, walkers, and future drivers. Let's bring in a friend of the show, GDOT spokesperson Natalie Dale. By the way, she's also my college classmate. We went to Auburn University together, so War Eagle to you on this Friday morning. All right, Natalie, good to see you. So you guys launched this program last year, so a pretty new program. What's the motivation behind it?
Well, we are entering into our 3rd year of this very revolutionary program. We're one of the first states to do this, if not the first. And what we have done is we have partnered with the We Are Teachers organization and Livingston Marketing to make these smart, ready-to-use classroom materials for K through 12 students in Georgia. They are completely free resources for teachers to use in their classroom. We really want to focus on getting these smart messages about being a great passenger, being a great motorist, we talk about wheels. Kids have wheels. They're on skateboards. They're on scooters. They're pedestrians. How can we from an early age help to educate them about what it takes to be a safe user of our road system? And so we've developed all of these materials, and they're not just things like workbooks, boring, but workbooks are very important for some groups, but we also have games where you can take a road trip throughout Georgia. Pick your car, go learn so much about not just the state, but the transportation system throughout our state.
That's awesome. Such an important thing. So, Natalie, we know Georgia struggles with distracted driving. How does this program help with that in particular?
Well, it takes more than just a driver that's tuned in to not be distracted. We take for granted. We think that the driver just has to be one paying attention. Look, I have a 9-year-old and a 5-year-old, and they are very quick to say, Mom, look at this, turn around, look at this, I can put my leg behind my head. They're always trying to get our attention. At a young age, teaching them that they need to be a good passenger so that the driver can be attentive. But you're very right. When we look at crashes in Georgia, the overwhelming majority of crashes are directly related to distracted behavior or things like aggressive speeding, road rage. But again, we dial it back to distracted behavior. And I can be distracted because I'm on my phone. I shouldn't be, but I can be just as easily distracted by my 9-year-old asking me to check out her test that she got that day. And so kids need to understand the role they play in being a passenger and being a pedestrian, so that as they get older, that's ingrained in their system when they do get behind the wheel.
Yeah, so important to start that early, as you mentioned. Are there any plans to link this program with maybe driver's ed or any community groups out there?
Well, those have their own very strong programs, and so we love to support that. We right now are entering into, again, the 3rd year of this. We are working with other states so that they can develop similar programs for their students, for the youth in their state. Like the previous guest just said, we're a mobile country. We don't just stay in Georgia. And so we want to make sure that kids throughout the nation are getting the important information that they need to understand the road system better, to be a great road user. And so we're working directly with other states, and We Are Teachers, which is an amazing group that develops these materials free of charge for teachers, with Livingston Marketing, to make sure that this information is going nationwide, because we are, I went to college at Auburn with you. That wasn't where I was from, but I brought we want those students to bring their good road user knowledge wherever they go to college or whether they work in the future. We want this to be part of their life as they become more detailed road users, as they get behind the wheel.
Yeah, and Natalie, quickly before you go, this is still a relatively new program, 18 months or so in. Have you seen any impact so far with kids or teachers or even parents?
Well, anecdotally, I was able to speak with the We Are Teachers group, and then one of the teachers who stars in our videos for the site, to talk about how the impact we're seeing in the classroom. We spoke as part of our podcast, highlighting this at our GDOT podcast, but we talked to them about what they're seeing in the classrooms, and the stories are amazing about how these kids really take this information to heart. They go home and they say, Mom, put your phone down, because we learned in class today that that's dangerous. Or, Mom, you forgot to buckle your seatbelt. We know how dangerous that is. Or, Mom, do you know why a roundabout is important? We get a lot of questions about roundabouts. And so kids are learning. We know they're learning because we hear these amazing stories about how they're engaged in these lessons in the classroom, but how they're also bringing these lessons home to people like me who may be a little rusty behind the wheel when it comes to rules of the road.
Awesome. Great things you guys are doing over there. Natalie Dale, thanks so much. And War Eagle again.
War Eagle. Right. Always good to see you.
All right, good to see you as well. We'll be right back with more of The Take. Stay with us on this Friday morning. Welcome back. Well, late yesterday, we saw a major shakeup for next year's midterm elections here in Georgia involving the Office of Secretary of State. Well, as he does every Friday, we are joined by 11Alive Zach Merchant, co-host of the Georgia Vote. Zach, always good to see you. Okay, so walk us through this moment. It was a pretty big bombshell moment that happened.
Yeah, Jonathan, it is always good to see you as well, especially on a Friday morning. And you're right, we're running out of cliches to say it was a busy week in Georgia politics, because it was another busy week in Georgia politics. And a well-known name in Georgia politics, Republican politics in particular, has now launched a new campaign. We're talking about Gabriel Sterling. He spent many years as one of the most high-profile, probably the most visible lieutenant in Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger's office, and that is, of course, the office that oversees most primarily and most visibly to the public the state's elections system. Sterling rose to national prominence as a fierce defender of Georgia's election system, particularly in the wake of that very controversial, very high-profile 2020 presidential election here in Georgia. And now we can report that Gabe Sterling has launched a campaign of his own for the top job. He wants to be Georgia's next Secretary of State.
Yeah, a lot of people did not see this coming, but as you said, a big name here. So that begs the question, what does that mean for current Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger?
It does beg that question. It is a great question because, of course, we currently have an incumbent Republican Secretary of State in Brad Raffensperger. He's the guy who Gabe Sterling for many years worked for. Sterling recently left the Secretary of State's office, which was kind of one of the first indicators that perhaps a campaign was looming. But what happens to Brad Raffensperger? Is he going to run again for Secretary of State? Sterling getting in this race raises some questions about that. We should note, Raffensperger has been doing a series of interviews around the state. He did a big one with us a few months ago where he strongly indicated, implied, suggested that he was at the very least closely eyeing a potential run for higher office. He hasn't said anything declarative just yet about his future plans, but watch this space because this with Sterling getting in the race perhaps tightens the timeline for Raffensperger to make a decision about his future. And we should note too, because it is not just a Sterling race right now. We also have a Democrat in Adrian Consineri in this Secretary of State race and two Republicans, State Representative Tim Fleming and Kelvin King, already in this field of Secretary of State contenders, and more people could be jumping in still. We have time.
Yes, certainly a lot of time, a year left. Okay, so until the election. So let's talk about something else. We know Congress is back in session, Zach, and lawmakers really have a big deadline coming up.
Yeah, it's kind of like going back to school and immediately having a big deadline right off the bat. You're still kind of going through, syllabus week, and you got to do your homework. The government needs to pass a spending bill to keep the government open. And they've got to pass it by the end of this month, by September 30th. If Congress cannot hammer out a deal to pass a new spending bill, the government's going to run out of funding, or at least run out of sort of budgeted funding, and we would be in a situation where a government shutdown would happen. So all these lawmakers, they're just getting back from summer recess. They're back on Capitol Hill. We spoke with one of Georgia's federal lawmakers, that's Democrat Senator John Ossoff, this week, and I asked him, what are you going to do to make sure that a spending bill gets done to avert a government shutdown? You can hear his answer coming up this Sunday on the Georgia Vote.
Yeah, we'll be watching the Georgia Vote, Zach, this Sunday. What else do you guys have coming up? We've got about 20 seconds here.
Always a packed show. One of the things we always like to highlight is the voice of the voter. It's how we end every show, and it's a chance to highlight regular folks in Metro Atlanta and give them the space to share what matters most to them in politics. Because politics is about real, regular people when you boil it all down, right? This week we talked to a man who's seen a whole lot of real, regular folks. He is retired high school and college football referee. This is, we're in the fall football weather. It's getting crisp outside. He had some really interesting perspective. You can catch that on Sunday at 11.
All right, we'll be watching the Georgia Vote. Zach, thanks so much. We appreciate it. And as Zach mentioned, you can watch the Georgia Vote with Zach and Faith Jesse Sunday morning at 11 right here on 11Alive Plus. Well, big changes are coming to Fayetteville's town at Trilith. A massive new entertainment hub is taking shape, blending theaters, sound stages, and community spaces. It's poised to boost Georgia's creative economy while giving locals a brand new place to gather and experience live events. So let's find out what's behind Trilith Live from its general manager and executive director, Matt McLean. Matt, good to see you on this Friday morning. So when people hear Trilith Live, what do you think that they should picture here? What's this all about?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. They should picture a state-of-the-art entertainment complex that's got all of the various things that families and individuals want to go to experience live entertainment firsthand at the highest quality.
Well, Matt, we know this project. If people are familiar with Trilith, they know it started years ago pretty much as a movie theater space here in the metro area. So how did you guys grow now into something a lot bigger, really a massive creative hub?
Yeah, to your point, started with the studios, and it's been super successful on that side of the street with some of the biggest Marvel movies coming out of it. Town came to the other side of the street, and through that, when you picture vibrant communities, that really has at its core entertainment, things that people love to go and do, love to be a part of, and have experiences that create lifelong memories. So this was just the next great step in that journey.
Mm-hmm. And we know Atlanta has a lot of big venues, Metro Atlanta, big, nice, newer venues even. How does Trilith set itself apart from the others that we often see?
Yeah, great venues in Atlanta. Some of the best in the country and in the world. At Trilith, we have created this entertainment hub that has opportunities for people to come and be part of live audience TV shows, to come and enjoy movies in a luxury cinema that compares to some of the best in the country. Our luxury cinema will actually have the largest LED screen when it opens in the country. And amazing large format opportunities as well. And then the live entertainment venue is going to have some of the best production qualities within it and service for not only the artists back of house, but for our guests and fans that are coming in the front of house.
That's awesome. This was certainly no easy feat, a big undertaking. What surprised you the most as you guys were getting this all off the ground?
Yeah, just the desire for it to be a first-class facility. I've been a part of a lot of venues around the country, and all the elements that we're putting in this to focus on both that artist and fan experience are second to none. We're putting in an immersive sound system that rivals some of the best sound in the country. The seating, the way that we've designed the venue, allows you to be super intimate in close proximity to the artist and the artist to the fans. And we know that both artists and fans desire and seek out opportunities like that. So we're really excited for all that the venue has to offer.
All right, I love to hear that. I got to check it out. Okay, so you guys have already pretty much wrapped up phase one. You're looking at phase two. So what's the timeline on finishing that part?
Yeah, we'll be finishing by the end of this year and opening up to fans at the first of the year. But at the end of this year, specifically, we plan to open the cinema and let people come and enjoy those Christmas movies that are being released before they head into the new year.
Yeah, that'll be perfect timing right there with Christmas. Matt McLean, great to have you here on The Take. We appreciate you. Thanks.
Thanks so much.
All right, we've got plenty more in store for you. Stay with us on this Friday right here on The Take. This morning, a new jobs report just came out, as we mentioned earlier, showing the labor market is continuing to cool. CNN's Maribel Hebert joins us now from the NASDAQ market in New York. Good morning to you, Maribel. So give us the details and how's the market reacting to this morning?
Hey, good morning, Jonathan. It's a weak jobs report and could factor into the Fed issuing an interest rate cut later this month. So the U.S. economy added just 22,000 jobs last month. That's far below the 75,000 that were forecast by economists. It's also well below the 79,000 jobs the economy added in July. At the same time, the unemployment rate ticked up slightly to 4.3%. So Wall Street is looking to see the details of the report for signs as to whether the job market has just slowed or if it's rapidly deteriorating. And with the Fed focused on the labor market, this weak report is expected to be yet another reason for the Fed to cut its key interest rate. As far as markets are concerned, Jonathan, right now we're seeing all green arrows here at NASDAQ. We're up 144 and the Dow is up 72.
All right. Well, Maribel, let's also talk about Spirit. Spirit is grounding flights in a dozen cities, we're hearing, while some competitors also seeing some changes. What are you hearing about that?
Okay, so Spirit's ending service in nearly a dozen cities this fall as the bankrupt airline fights for survival. Birmingham, Alabama, Chattanooga, Tennessee, and Columbia, South Carolina are among the cities where Spirit will end service. The changes take place in October, according to CNBC. Rival airlines like United and Frontier have been adding flights in a number of markets Spirit operates, including Spirit's home base of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. A United executive said flights were added in case Spirit, quote, suddenly goes out of business. And just last week, Frontier Airlines announced 20 new routes that compete with Spirit. Jonathan.
All right, let's now turn to Gap and Old Navy. When you think about them, you pretty much think about clothing, but now we're hearing they may be getting into cosmetics.
Jonathan, Gap's Old Navy stores are expanding deeper into beauty products. Starting this fall, the stores will offer a wider assortment of beauty items, including some sold under the Old Navy brand. Now, the rollout includes everything from skincare and makeup to hair products and nail polish. And according to the Wall Street Journal, most will be priced under $25. It's a change in strategy for Gap as it looks for ways to grow beyond its core clothing business. But Gap is expanding into the beauty business relatively late. Retailers from luxury brands like Chanel, Louis Vuitton, Amazon, other retailers from Abercrombie and Fitch to Urban Outfitters have all moved into beauty in recent years. And Kohl's even has Sephora shops in its stores. But Jonathan, I'm old enough to remember when it was called The Gap, not Gap, for the generational gap.
Okay, yeah, that was back then. All right, so let's talk about this, Maribel. Are you ready for some football? It is a big football weekend, and it sounds like that might be a safe bet for many people who are hoping to strike it rich.
Oh, Jonathan, I mean, this is big time. I'm sad, though, not 7 hours of uninterrupted football. We got commercials now. So the NFL season kicked off last night. It's expected to be a record-setting one for sports betting. Legal betting in the U.S. is forecast to grow 8.5% this NFL season to $30 billion. So that's according to an estimate. It comes from the American Gaming Association. And executives at sportsbooks say betting has been strong despite economic uncertainty and concerns over discretionary spending. So far, there have been no reductions in the average size of bets or how often people are betting on sports, according to one CEO. Jonathan, I only caught the highlights, but what a way to kick off the season. You got the drama, you got the weather, and a close game. It
was a lot. It was a lot going on. Now, we're going to be talking about that later on. And by the way, sports betting, we're not supposed to do it here in Georgia. It's technically illegal, but it's still part of kind of the way of life here. We'll see. All right, Maribel Hebert.
We'll know about the parlays. Okay.
There you go. We appreciate you. Have a great weekend. We have plenty more in store for you. This is The Take, so stay right here. All right, welcome back on this Friday morning. Big changes are coming to one of Georgia's most visited parks. Starting early next year, personal cars will no longer be allowed up at the Summit Road area at Kennesaw Mountain. Instead, a daily shuttle service and newly separated lanes for walkers and bikes will take their place, all a part of a major safety push on the winding road and the rounding route to the top. Here to explain what's going on in the move is Ray Hamill, a park ranger at Kennesaw Mountain National Battlefield Park. Ray, so good to see you this morning. All right, first off, I got to admit, I've not been there. I've not been at the top of Kennesaw Mountain Park. So for those of us who haven't, kind of describe the views for us.
Well, from the summit of Kennesaw Mountain, there is a large parking lot. If you look out to the south and the southeast, you can see Buckhead, you can see Atlanta, and you can also see on a good day all the way over to Stone Mountain.
All right. Well, we see some of the views right here. We're showing some of our viewers from above in some of this video. So the bigger question, I think, now is why is the park deciding to make this change now? What's the main concern here?
Yeah, the 1.5 Mountain Road, which ascends to the summit of Kennesaw Mountain, is a steep, narrow, and winding with a 12% grade, several blind curves. It is heavily used by a mix of pedestrians, cyclists, and vehicles, leading to increasingly frequent traffic incidents and visitor conflicts and medical emergencies. When the park was designed, it was never designed to accommodate this many visitors. We're pushing 2 million visitors a year. Of course, not all of them are utilizing the Mountain Road, but since it is so narrow and it does have those blind corners, we're having an increase in those near misses and safety incidents.
Yeah, you got to think about safety first. But I do know a lot of people love personally getting in their car and driving up to the top. So how will their experience now change with what you guys are doing?
Sure. The road will only be accessible on foot, bicycle, or the park's shuttle service. We're adding a second shuttle. Right now, we just have one that operates on the weekends and federal holidays, but this new operation will be expanding to 7 days a week. The shuttle buses provide a safe and convenient way for visitors to reach the summit while reducing the congestion and preserving the natural environment.
Have you guys looked at any other options, though? Maybe widening the roads or, maybe timing the vehicle access or, maybe I know removing cars altogether is what you ultimately decided. But are there any other options that you at least considered?
What we did in the planning phase, we did have some periods of public comment. With our planners, we looked at several different options. One of them, the most obvious, is widening the road. Well, we need to preserve the historic integrity of the battlefield. That's our primary mandate when the park legislation was actually enabled back in the 1930s. With widening the road, it comes with a certain set of challenges. First and foremost, erosion. So the road is widened over on the left-hand shoulder. It's a pretty steep drop-off in most areas, and erosion is an ongoing concern.
And I know you've heard from visitors. I'm sure you've heard a lot. Some feel that this is a good move, while others think it's more about restricting access than safety. How do you respond to those people who have that type of criticism?
Yeah, we understand this change may impact how some visitors experience the park. However, this decision prioritizes safety and aligns with our mission to protect both visitors and the park resource. And we're committed to preserving the natural and historical integrity of the park while ensuring a safe and accessible experience for all visitors. So this will not, everybody will still have access to the mountaintop. It's just going to look a bit different how we've done it traditionally.
Yeah, and you mentioned there have been some situations where there have been some really close calls, people concerned about their safety. So looking ahead, do you think the changes that you've made will make people who maybe were a little intimidated to come or concerned about their safety come back? Do you think that we'll see that?
Yeah, we anticipate that, yes.
All right, well, that's always good. For those people who are planning their first visit, I mentioned I need to plan my first visit to the mountain, even now after all of these changes. What do you hope the overall experience will be like? What do you want people to take away when they come and visit the park and the mountain?
Great question. As the metro area has grown, this is one of the last remaining green spaces for folks to get out and immerse themselves in the resource. It's a tremendous resource. We have, of course, 1.5 mile mountain road, but we also have 22 miles of unpaved trails in our whole entire network. So it's a great opportunity to come out, and they can still go ahead, take time, reflect. We want folks to keep in mind, even though this is a great place to come and experience the park for recreational opportunities, this was the place of a tremendous sacrifice. Thousands of Americans made the ultimate sacrifice here, and that's why the park is here, is to commemorate that and that pretty much so we can interpret that pivotal point in American history.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's look maybe 5 or 10 years down the road. How do you see these access changes maybe shaping the park's role in the community altogether?
Well, right now, this is the first step. We're going to see how this works. We're pretty confident, and we're eager to see how it's implemented and what it looks like. And as the population grows even more, we may have to revisit this and see what other options we have.
All right, Ray Hamill joining us this morning. Have a great weekend. We appreciate you joining us this morning.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
All right, we've got more to come for you this morning, so stay right here on 11Alive Plus. This is The Take. All right, let's take a live look outside on this Friday morning of our great city of Atlanta. You can see really a lot of the skyline here. It is still technically summer, and that you will feel this weekend as we get back into the 90s after starting off our week pretty cool. A big weekend for a lot of you, getting ready for some high school football tonight. And of course, we have a lot of our college teams, including UGA, playing tomorrow at Sanford Stadium. And then Sunday, the Falcons with their home opener getting ready to take on the Bucs. So a big weekend of football, so enjoy your weekend here in Atlanta. Hey, before we go, my final take, and since we're talking about football here, let's talk about what many of you are talking about. A lot of y'all calling this Spitgate. You may have watched last night's Eagles and Cowboys game in prime time. It was a big game, and you didn't have to watch long to see what happened. Eagles defensive tackle and former Georgia Bulldog Jalen Carter there was ejected after spitting at Dallas Cowboys quarterback, Dak Prescott, just one play into the game. Now that's Jalen Hurts right there. And that is not Jalen Carter. That is Jalen Hurts right there. I want to make sure that's clear. But it was a stupid situation. He let his team down. And let's be honest, it was just kind of downright disrespectful. Even some diehard Eagles fans have said it was disgusting, it was dumb, it was selfish. I know this morning there are a lot of questions about who spat on who first and who started the argument based on some new video that's been out there at NBC. But my take is that it really doesn't matter who said what, who started what. Spitting at someone or towards someone in sports or really anywhere is just wrong. And Carter was ejected. He's also apologized, called it a mistake, and he'll probably face a fine. But should more happen? I believe so. I think the league should do more, at least maybe a game suspension, and send a message to Carter and the rest of the league that it's not okay. You just can't spit on anybody. Have a great Friday and enjoy your football. Be nice.